All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's featured event, Electrify Your Ride from the racetrack to your driveway. So today we're talking with members of Audi's Formula E race team and looking to understand how racing electric vehicles can help increase the adoption of clean electric mobility. Not to mention, proving EVs are definitely fun to drive. My name is Stuart Gardner with Generation 180, and I'm one of today's hosts. Before we get started, I just wanted to briefly give you a little introduction about Generation 180. We're a nationwide nonprofit organization inspiring and equipping individuals to take action on clean energy. One of our key programs is the Electrify Your Ride campaign and the I'm Going Electric pledge. Our goal is to make EVs more accessible through access to our network of EV owner advocates and educational events like this one. If you want to find out more about Generation 180, check us out at generation180.org. And while you're there, sign the pledge. And now, without further ado, introducing our co-host who will tell you a little bit more about our panel, Blair St. Ledger Olson. Blair?
Thanks, Stuart. Hi, everyone. Like Stuart said, my name is Blair St. Ledger Olson, and I am very excited to introduce our speakers today, Allan McNish and Lucas de Grassi from Audi's Formula E team. And we're also joined by Mark Schneider, who's on the corporate side of things. So now, because of the amount of people we have on this call, everybody except our panelists is on mute and has their video turned off. Otherwise, the sound would be crazy. So what we're asking you to do instead is submit your questions through the Q&A portal on Zoom, not the chat. So the Q&A is what we'll be using to make sure we're seeing everybody's questions and answering them as well as we can. So thanks for keeping track of those and using those housekeeping tips. And Mark, would you be able to give our audience a brief overview of Formula E and introduce our special guests?
Sure, Blair. Thank you very much. Yeah, from my side, a very warm welcome on behalf of Audi and our Formula E team, Audi Sport Up Schaffler. Thanks to all the Gen 180 team for organizing this and setting this one up. And also thanks to all of you for joining. It's 6 p.m. in Europe, where some of us are based. I think it's lunchtime in the United States. So great that you found the time to join us. I believe that most of you are very much into electric cars. You even probably drive one, or you have driven one and tried one out. And the same with us at Audi. So we are very much into electric mobility, not only on the road, but also obviously on the racetrack. Audi has been, as you may know, competing in Formula E from the very beginning. So it's our 6th season now. Our team is so far, in terms of trophies that Lucas and his friends brought home, the most successful team in this championship. And yeah, I'm very happy that we have Lucas and our team principal, Allan McNish, joining us today for this webinar. And before I introduce our guys to you, I'll probably give you first quick view about what Formula E is all about, just in case you may have missed our races in the last couple of years in front of the Manhattan skyline in downtown Brooklyn. Yeah, just to give you a quick idea what we are talking about with these guys in a minute. So let me share my screen for this.
The grid is set. We are about to go racing. Wait for those 5 red lights. And we go green in Asteria, Marrakesh, Santiago, Mexico City, in Sanya, in Rome, Paris, in Berlin. And we go green in New York City. Very, very quick lights out.
What is that?
Carving through the field.
Was not very safe, mate.
This is a risky one. He's on it. Oh, what a move.
Completely drove me into the wall.
What on earth has gone on?
Do not take your teammate out.
Oh, Lotter's got damage. Flat tire.
Careful, mate, careful.
It's not correct. This is wrong. I never saw that in my life, man.
Whoa, that's a big airborne crash for Nelson Piquet. Oh, that was a mad move. This just feels like it's bubbling.
Push, yes!
John-Eric Verne is a 2-time Formula E champion.
Amazing, congratulations to everyone. 5 seasons.
So I think, yeah, we've seen a lot of drama and action in the last 2 minutes. Sometimes more drama than we would have loved, as you've seen Lucas in some pictures there. Obviously, you'll see that this video has been produced to promote the season 6 with a lot of new locations which were supposed to be visited by us, but obviously this is not possible in these times. But nevertheless, I think you got a good impression about what Formula E is all about. And as I said, you've seen lots of drama and action. This is what we love at Audi, but it's not the only reason why we compete in Formula E. And for Audi, Formula E is more than racing. For us, it's racing for a reason. I've just put together some arguments why Audi is so committed to Formula E. Of course, it fits the company's strategy in terms of the way we're going to go in the future. It's cost efficient. We go racing where the fans and the people are in downtown cities. And of course, it also brings some relevant technology transfer for the road cars, so for customers like you and me. Good example is the brake-by-wire system, which we have in Formula E and you have now in your e-tron road car. So enough about Formula E. I would say your guest today, as mentioned before by Blair, is Lucas de Grassi, one of our drivers and our team principal, Allan McNish. You may be aware of those two names in case you're not. Allan has been our team principal for some years now. Started in season 4 and immediately led us to winning the team's championship with a pretty dramatic weekend in front of the Manhattan skyline, I have to admit. It could have been a little bit less drama. And before his role as our team principal, you can look back to more than 30 years of racing, and that also includes Formula 1, but also even more important, 3 wins with Audi at the famous 24 hours of Le Mans. Bringing over to Lucas de Grassi, a quite familiar face in Formula E. Lucas has been with the Audi family for almost a decade now. His motorsport life has started long before that. He's been driving almost everything with 4 wheels. I'm not sure about 2 wheels actually, but with 4 wheels, including Formula 1, the Audi LMP prototypes at Le Mans, and all various kinds of race cars with combustion engine, hybrid engines, and electric engines. Somehow that seems not to be enough for 24 hours and 7 days a week. He's also a UN ambassador for clean air, is involved in other exciting projects like RoboRace, which is a company which pushes the development of autonomous driving forward. So both of them live with their families in Monaco, from where they join us now. And I'm pretty sure they will take us to a little trip around the electrifying life of themselves. If you own an e-tron or if you're interested in an e-tron, they are the best person to talk to because both of them have an e-tron in front of their door. So thanks again for joining. Back to the Gen 180 guys and enjoy our conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks so much. Hey, Allan, let's start with you. You have a 30-year championship career racing traditional powertrains. I even saw you win at Le Mans a couple of times. I'm wondering what inspired you to move to racing electric vehicles? Can you kind of help us understand that journey?
Yeah, there was a few things. One is that as a racing driver, all the time you're looking at the next technology. What's going to be the next thing, the next advantage you're going to gain out of it? And that clearly, from Audi's point of view, was going to be electrification of their road cars. But as ever, they use the technology they learn on the racetrack in advance to be able to develop the road car. And so that was clearly one of the sort of views from I would say, an Audi sport point of view and an Audi perspective. And the other one was Lucas, because when I did my last season in 2013 as a driver, Lucas was already testing the first Formula E car. And every time we sort of got together at a test or something, all he talked about was this Formula E. And he was telling us what it was like, what it was going to be like and things. And I'd already decided I was ending my driving career, but I didn't say I was ending my motorsport career. And so really, I would have said the enthusiasm for the program was probably inspired by Lucas, but at the same time, you know, from an Audi perspective, then it was clearly the next step in terms of what Audi was going to be doing in motorsport. And so all in all, it's kind of worked in pretty well, I would have said.
Well, that actually tees us up really well for the next question. You almost answered it for me, Alan. Lucas, so you also used to race gasoline-powered cars, but you've been part of Formula E since day one. You were the first driver to sign on. So were you interested in electric vehicles prior to Formula E, and why? It sounds like you were.
Hello, Blair. Hello, Stuart, Mark, and Alan. Pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about Formula E, everybody that is watching us at Gen 180. Like Alan said, there is a natural progression of technology in motorsport, and motorsport needs to stay relevant to the commercial industry. And it was very clear that the decade from 2020 to 2030 would be the electrification decade, or all the manufacturers would have to focus on electrification. From 2030 to 2040 would be more on the automation side, which is robo race. But back then, of course, my dream when I was a kid was to drive Formula One. I raced, I drove Formula One for a whole season for Virgin. Then I joined Audi in sports car. Actually, Alan didn't say that, but I joined the World Endurance Championship just because Alan retired. So the year that Alan retired as a racing driver, I got in his spot, got upgraded within Audi, which was the first year of the hybrid car. So it was very clear that the tendency was going towards electrification. And it's not a matter only of sustainability, although sustainability is a big part of it. It's a matter of finding the best efficient in terms of energy cost and operation cost of going from point A to point B, and how motorsport can use kind of the same technology, but to format in a way that you can push the technology forward and then generate some value to the manufacturer. So the manufacturer invests in motorsport, develop very quickly the technology, and then this technology is funneled back into motorsport. It has happened many times before with seat belts, with disc brakes, with even mirrors and so on. So there is turbocharged. There was a lot of carbon fiber and so on. So this is what Formula E was about. I was the third employee. I was not the first driver to join for Formula E. I was the third employee, and I helped to build the championship from scratch since July 2012. And for me, it's an honor to see, or like a pleasure to see, and an honor to have been part of this beginning of the championship.
So that's actually a really interesting point that I don't think, everyday people understand, that racing really is an opportunity to test technologies. And so, we've seen EVs come an extraordinarily long way since you all first started racing in 2014. I mean, first 4 seasons, you had to swap cars in the race because of the battery ranges, and now that's not an issue. So can you give us some insight really into how the technology is tested in Formula E and how that then impacts the rest of the cars that we drive? And that, Lucas, if you want to kick us off, but Alan or Mark, we'd love your perspective as well.
Yes, I'm sure most of the people watching us, I don't know if you, Blair, have done it, but I don't know if you have changed your battery of your car. And to understand...
2 days ago.
Okay, so you know how heavy it is. And that battery is a lead acid battery. And it's very, very heavy because it's lead, and lead is very heavy. And it's a super old technology, actually from Faraday time back in London, doing experiments with it, this lead acid technology, and still used in car today. So since the advent of computers and portable phones, the lithium-ion battery became more available. And then and when Formula E was created, nobody has ever done a racing car, electric, in history. So the design of the first Formula E car was, of course, a breakthrough, but in a certain way, trying to be reliable and conservative with the battery design. So we use more or less the same technology as the smartphones and the computers, with a lot of lithium-ion batteries. And that gave us 300 kilos of batteries to drive for half a race with, let's say, 250 horsepower. In a few years, so in 5 years, we evolved to a 300 kilos battery that has twice the energy and about 50% more power. So with special cells made as well out of lithium ion. And the biggest constraint of an electric car is the battery. The same with your phone. You'd say, oh, my phone doesn't last the whole day. The constraint is the storage of energy. So as battery evolves, the cars will become very light and very powerful. But our technology, like the electric motor we have in our race car, it's so small, so light. If you have a very powerful battery car, you can easily put 4 motors in the car. The car can have more than 1,000 horsepower or less for an hour or more. And that's how the technology will evolve. So from season 1 to 2, we went from 2 batteries to 1. And the tendency is clearly exponential growth in terms of battery technology.
I go on from what Lucas just said there. I think another factor for us is the fact that we are trying now in developing technology to be able to regenerate more energy. So we're in the actual e-tron here, when you come up to junctions and things like that, automatically it senses and regenerates energy as you're doing that. But we're doing that through the racing programs as well to get energy back into the battery. And this lift and coast, or alternatively, it's on a paddle on the steering wheel, or when Lucas brakes into the corner, is doing that. And as a Scotsman, I love free energy. There's no question about it. It's certainly something for my heart. But what we have seen is the actual efficiency of the motor themselves, we're like 97% efficient. So we're not going to be able to increase that very much. But what we can do is harvest what would be lost energy back in, and then to use that again. And there's another step forward there. And that's an area where I think we're in a pretty good shape, probably because we've had a lot of experience of this from our Le Mans programs that we talked about earlier on, as well as what we're doing in Formula E. But Mark gave a very good singular example, in my opinion, of something that when you were talking about race to road and that crossover is the brake-by-wire. Because we developed that initially at Le Mans. It's been developed on the Season 5 car. And at the same time, the e-tron was the first pure battery electric vehicle with brake-by-wire on it. And so that technology is definitely something that has been able to be utilized from race to road. And on this race circuit, we're using it to be able to harvest more energy back into the battery as well.
Given how much technology evolves, I'm wondering for both Allan and Lucas, what were some of your perceptions before you got into Formula E racing, or perhaps misconceptions about electric vehicles and racing electric vehicles?
You want me to start, Lucas?
Please start, Allan.
Well, I heard about it from Lucas, and I've gone to a few races. In the first season, I went to the race in Monaco, and I went with my children because I wanted to see what this was like, because it was a generational shift, and I wanted to see whether they actually appreciated it in the same way as I appreciate going to what I call traditional motorsport back in the 70s with my father. And there was a lot of it that was interesting. There was a few bits that I have to be honest with you, I thought, it's not quite where it needs to be. And then 12 months later, I went to the race in Berlin, and it was a big step forward. And then in season 3, it was another huge step forward. So I'd said it's like a startup in a way, where it was learning as it was going along, but with a massive energy and speed. I must say, though, that it was something that took me by surprise how quickly it's been adopted. And also one thing that Lucas mentioned earlier on, how quickly it's changed people's perceptions of electric vehicles. And that actually came out in an FIA study that I just received today, was that motorsport, and especially Formula E, was a changing of perception of what electric vehicles could do. And that's in terms of their performance, it's in terms of their abilities, and also the factor that I thought I was going to miss when I went to that first race in Monaco, which was the sound, because it still produces,
that was coming,
but in a different way. And there now, as the cars are developing, you can actually hear the differences between a Nissan or a Jaguar or an Audi, just in the tone as the electric motor goes past. And it's something that I think is a change, but it's a change not in a bad way. But it's a change that actually people will get used to as they get more accustomed to the fact that that's just what it is. It's a little bit different, but it's still a sound and it's still emotion.
Mm-hmm. Lucas, anything to add there?
Yeah, of course. My understanding of electric vehicles was never to was never judging how to make an electric vehicle faster. But when you look at the essence of why a battery-powered electric motor works, and you look towards the efficiency, and you look the ratio of torque versus weight, and all the physics behind, and you see a very clear evolution trend of the technologies evolving. You see that there would have been a crossover with combustion vehicles somewhere in the past 5 years. So it's just a matter of collecting the right data, doing the right analysis, and understand that the value that this new proposal would have for the OEMs, and how we could accelerate this progress. I think a lot of people, the people actually who missed this the Formula E train, let's say in the very beginning, they were offered teams and they were offered entries, or even fans or drivers that they said no. They simply didn't realize that that was the future, regardless of their opinions and regardless of whatever they like it or not, because basic laws of physics and development, an electric powertrain is more efficient, and for each segment there is a way of calculating it. For example, electric transatlantic planes. It will take a very long time to happen. You cannot just put a 747 electric and say, no, I want electric. Let's say the Greta Thunbergs of the world, you cannot fly anymore, let's make an electric plane. You can't. Technology at the moment is not in a state that you can make an electric plane, not an electric ship, but you can make electric cars cheaper and better and faster than combustion cars, especially for the consumer. So that creates a lot of value for the manufacturers, and that's how you see that this vision or the technology would have a future or not. That was the bet. There was a very calculated bet. Of course, you still need to go there and produce it and make sure that the timing is correct. But there is no way back. The ratio that the technology is evolving and how quickly it is being transferred to commercial vehicles is just outstanding. It's something that we only see over generations. We saw an energy transition from horses to steam engines, then steam engines to internal combustion engines, and now internal combustion engines to electric. So it's something that happens every 50 to 100 years only. And by the time we reach, like Allan said, an electric motor with an efficiency like ours in Formula E, and the Audi motor is something around 97, 98% efficient, you can spend infinite money, you never go over a 99.9 efficiency because of the second law of thermodynamics, but it is already 3 times more efficient than any combustion engine ever created, regardless of how much technology and how much money, just because, again, the laws of physics that it has to obey. So the future is definitely electric, but again, going back to the battery issue, the big developments will come from battery. There is new technologies coming, solid state batteries, safer batteries, quicker recharge, less heat dissipation, and that will provide not only for cars, for city storages, for any type of mobility will progress towards electric, apart from rockets. Rockets will not go electric because they need a kind of a thrust, but apart from that, everything else will go electric in the next decades or so.
That's a whole different type of racing with rockets.
Well, you can actually, to be honest, I proposed a rocket in a Formula E car, a different type of rocket, but I proposed something like this. But let's not go into detail. Let's not go into details with that.
Hey,
Mark, no.
Mark, help me, please, Mark. I've got to say, Lucas comes up with these ideas sometimes, and there's a few times that he clicks on something pretty special. The rocket one, I think, is going to take a little bit of time for us to get through that, though.
Yeah, but the problem, Allan, is if you want to have this special idea, you have to take the other 9 ones as well. So you have to deal with it.
Exactly, you have to take all the bad ones.
Mark, this one is for you from an Audi, from an OEM perspective. You know, Audi was one of the first German manufacturers to really fully embrace Formula E. How does racing electric vehicles fit into Audi's electrification strategy? What's that bigger picture there?
I think this is a question we can easily hand over to Allan, as he's in charge of the program. But clearly, just to give an entry, as I said before, whenever Audi's been doing motorsport in its history, it's always been racing for a reason. Remember when they came up with the four-wheel drive quattro in the rally times back in the 80s? They went to Le Mans with the TDI technology. They came with a hybrid car and won Le Mans, and now Formula E is the next thing. So Allan, if you can continue from that one.
Yeah, I think it's always been racing for a reason, racing with a direction, and that direction came under the banner of Vorsprung durch Technik all the time. And at the same time, as I said before, it was important, and it's always important that motorsport, as Lucas correctly said, is relevant. It's got to be relevant for what we're doing, not just as a sport, but also as an industry, and certainly at Audi, which is an engineering-led company. I think we've got to remember that what we did on the circuit was a precursor for it to arrive on the road. And Mark mentioned TDI. A good example for me was having lived through the start to the end of the Le Mans program. Basically, you saw so many different things: TDI, TFSI, LED lighting, laser lighting, the lightweight technology that we brought in the Ultra, which was to put the hybrid system in, where they had to take 10% of the car weight out to put a hybrid in and then reach the minimum weight. But that mentality, that philosophy was something that was very much between the road car development and the race car development, and is into all of the cars now, how to keep the strength, rigidity of the chassis, but as light as possible. And we know that weight is negative to performance if we've got excess weight. And so Formula E, when electrification was the vision for the future, and it's an increasing vision now. Initially, we were talking 25% of Audis by 2025 would be electrified. Now that has increased to 40% now. And so there is a huge push on electrification, and us in motorsport have to be at the beginning. And we were, we were very fortunate that in season 4, we had a tough battle in New York, and it was one that I was pulling my hair out. I've got to be honest with you. And that gave us a first and second in the Saturday race, and then a win in the Sunday, which then put us to actually win the team's title. And that was 1 month before we went to California, the backyard of maybe electrification in some ways, by some people's view, and launched the first ever e-tron. And so the first e-tron was launched 1 month after we won our first car championship.
That's awesome.
And so that philosophy is something that is still inbuilt with us. And now we're trying to win the next one and the next one after that, but also looking very much to what is going to be the next technology. What's the next thing that we need to do as well?
That actually raises a good point. And just as an aside, I can't stand driving in New York City in my own car, so I don't know how you do it in a race car. Sounds just terrifying from my perspective. But, as you were just saying, Allan, what are some of the technology breakthroughs that we can expect to start seeing potentially in the everyday EV cars for the rest of us? And actually, an audience question came in from Charles Garina. A 97% efficient motor is mind-blowing. What are the chances of bringing that efficiency to the e-tron? And what are Audi's other electric vehicle future ideas?
Well, certainly if I talk about that, yes, we are. You can't just take an electric motor for Formula E and put it into an e-tron. Because the case use is very different. Lucas is thrashing that racing car as hard as he can. He's putting his maximum energy in and maximum energy out every single braking and acceleration. I can tell you it's fantastic to watch, but from the actual parts themselves, it's really tough. And they've got a life cycle of basically a year. So in that respect, it's very different to what I want in my e-tron. At the same time, a lot of it is the way we develop and also what we are developing. And it comes with materials, comes with lighter materials. Batteries, as Lucas was mentioning, are getting lighter. They're getting lighter in motorsport, and they'll be getting lighter in the car industry. How you then recuperate more lost energies, and you basically reduce your losses. And so they're just some of the examples. In terms of technologies, it's about improvement as well as actually something radical and new. That will come with batteries. I think then it's improvements on the other side. But if I'm looking at it right now with a 97% efficiency, I'm not going to gain very much there. So I'm better looking somewhere else to try to get the big gains. And right now we're quite early in our electrification understanding. And so the road ahead is a good road, but it's one that's got a, you know, you can see quite far in the distance. Whereas maybe with the internal combustion engine, it's a little bit shorter, it's incremental gains. But Lucas can maybe sort of say something from a driving point of view as well.
So on the technologies that will be adapted directly from the race car to the Audi e-tron, Allan has gone through already. But there are a lot of technologies regarding an electric powertrain which are exclusively different from a combustion engine. And to start with is the center of gravity. Because a battery, it's very modular and you can place them everywhere. The center of gravity of a car, an electric car, is much lower than a combustion car, which means that all the weight of the car is in the floor. So even if the car is heavier, it feels lighter. So when you're driving it, for example, you're on a road, when you have to avoid, I don't know, something that was dropped or an animal that is crossing, then an electric car is much more agile than its counterpart in combustion engine, just because the center of gravity is much lower, especially for SUV types, which tend to have a much higher center of gravity. So an SUV with an electric powertrain probably has a very similar center of gravity than a sports car. And this changes a lot. Then the recuperation, like Allan mentioned, there is always a loss of energy when you recuperate and when you put the power through. So every time you change from AC to DC to charge the battery and then back to AC, there is a loss of energy. There is heat dissipation, and that's quite common. That's just physics. But of course, the recuperation, you save a lot of energy, so you're very efficient. So for example, one of the main pollutions that nobody talks about is disc brakes. So the pads, so the brake pads and the discs, they generate a lot of PM 2.5 because it's a very, very mild, very small dust that goes out of the brakes. From combustion engines, there is no way to avoid this. You need a disc to brake the car. So in the cities, regardless if you do biofuels or whatever you do, you still have that kind of pollution, which is super bad for the lungs and for any living being. With electric motor, for example, you don't need mechanical brakes. You can have pretty much 100% electric or magnetic brakes, which means that all the energy, instead of being wasted in heat, it's actually charged back the battery, and even if you have disc brakes and pads for an emergency, it's very unlikely that you need to change pads or brakes in the whole lifetime of the vehicle. So you can do 1,000,000 miles with it and probably you won't change it. So this is just one example. Then you have a special torque vector, and you can put an electronic millisecond precise torque in different motors to optimize the change of direction, the cornering, the acceleration. You can distribute much better the inside of the car. Like I said, the battery is modular. You don't need to put a block, an engine block, which has to operate at 90, 100 degrees in one part of the car and then choose, do I put it in the back? Do I put it in the front? And this discussion, you put it everywhere. You can have 3, 4 electric motors, one per wheel. You can have one per axle. You can have one per wheel, depending on what you need from that specific car. And that control of torque vectoring is much easier. Then when you talk about automation, to make an autonomous car electric is much more precise again, because you don't have the manual input into a combustion motor. You can electronically control pretty much all the systems in the car, braking, accelerating. You don't have to hydraulic press the pads. I'm going a bit technical here, so you tell me if I don't need to, but there is so much difference. There's so much technology that needs to be, that will be developed and will be integrated from a combustion. It's almost like you're saying an analogic film from Kodak and a digital film from an iPhone. They are both pictures, but the technology is a completely different technology. An electric car and a combustion car, they are cars, but they have the shape and the wheels and maybe the tires, which are the same, but essentially, and maybe the seats, but essentially they are completely different technologies. And this will just become even more apart as electric cars progresses.
So you're both of you, I believe, drive e-trons in your daily life. And Lucas, I think that set us up well for that. You know, it is a different technology, but at the same time, it's for everyday people, it's the same car that's taking you for your groceries, to the pharmacy, to drop your kids off at school. So what has been your experience having an EV for your daily driver? And Lucas, we'll start with you, and then Alan, I'd love your perspective as well.
The main change in perspective that I didn't have before was that I don't need a fast charger. I can charge my car on a 220 volt normal hair dryer. Like, not that I use hair dryer, as you can see, I don't. But you can charge the car there. So if you don't drive more than, let's say, 100 miles US terms, or let's say 160, 180 kilometers a day, you can definitely charge your car in a normal plug. You don't need to install anything special. You don't have a problem with range and anxiety. I drive average 20, 30 kilometers a day maximum. So the EV fits a lot of the purpose. And it's actually, this is very interesting. Even for a ride-sharing vehicle, there is an optimum amount of miles you have to do a day to get your maximum output of an electric vehicle. So for example, I don't know how it works in the US, but I did some calculations in Brazil. And in 5 years, driving 120 miles a day, you pay the price of the car with fuel. So again, it shows that if you drive enough kilometers, the OPEX of operating an electric car is actually cheaper and much cheaper than a combustion one. But if you drive 0 mileage, at the moment, electric cars are a bit more expensive than combustion. And if you drive a lot of miles, if you have to drive 500, 600, then an electric, you have to stop in between to charge, and you need a fast charger because you need to see if there is infrastructure installed around your place. But this range, which 95 or more, 99% of the people drive, the last number I guess, but around 90% of people, they drive, which is around less than 100 miles a day. Mm-hmm. An EV is the best solution ever. Plus maintenance, you don't need to change oil, you don't need to change brakes, clutch, anything. It's super simple.
Okay, so I just realized that we have 5 minutes left before I think you guys are going to leave us. So Alan, really quickly, what's your experience driving electric?
I would say that the biggest single thing for me is it's a technological step forward. To drive the car, I can drive it fast like I would a normal Q8, for example, or a Q7, and because it's a similar sort of sized vehicle, the e-tron. But this one actually educates me how to drive. So it's clever enough to work out when it's coming towards a stop junction or a corner that's got a speed limit, and then it'll recuperate energy to slow you down to the speed to go into the corner, as opposed to braking for you. And it's this type of style of, I would say, assistance that you can switch on or switch off that guides you along with it. And at the same time, from a pure emotion, and I keep coming back to this word, from a pure emotion of driving, then I am in the car. I'm driving the car. It's not driving me. I can drive the car. And that's something that I was a little bit concerned, if I'm very honest with you, but made me smile when I realized that I was still the person in charge and it was with me on the journey. In terms of, you know, driving long distance, infrastructure is something that's evolving as the technology is evolving. And that's going to be something that I think will actually take over in terms of its explosion of where you can charge, where you can fast charge, and the ability to do long distances. Different places, different countries have got different timescales, but certainly Germany is a very, very early adopter in this, and Europe is as well, moving quickly.
For sure. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I'm wondering about Lucas. You're a UN Climate Ambassador. Can you tell us a little bit about your role doing that?
Thank you, Stuart. In a nutshell, because of the creation of Formula E, and I've been there, we have a partnership with the United Nations on the environment side, on sustainability side, and I decided to use and to leverage my opinions on why electric vehicles are better. with them. Then they agree for me to be an ambassador and to put this message forward. So my main focus is clean air. So talking about, like I said, about the disc brakes, but it's something that a lot of people talk about climate change. Climate change vehicles only account for 10 to 12% of the total emissions. So we need to talk about a lot of other things. But outdoor air pollution, which kills 3.5 million people a year, it's mainly due to vehicles. And we are breathing the air, the combustion engines, they produce these harmful gases, and very few people talk about it. It's actually the total damage and the loss on average lifespan is much higher than actually we're gonna have in a perception way about climate change. So I think it's a much better platform to push forward. Say, look, you're breathing polluted air. Let's change to EV and you're not gonna breathe polluted air. It's better than saying, look, in 30 years, the sea level is gonna rise by 2 meters, which is also true, but people don't, it's less feelable. So I'm using this perspective to push a little bit more on electric vehicles.
So I think that's a really interesting point and goes to one of the last questions I want to ask. I don't think we can get together and talk right now without acknowledging the fact that we're in a very unusual time. Under normal circumstances, we'd love to do this in person with an audience. You'd love to be racing with an audience. So, how has this international health crisis, this pandemic, changed your perspective on, advocacy around electric vehicles? Do you think that there are positive takeaways to what we're seeing to the global response to coronavirus that we can apply towards, increasing the number of EVs on the road?
I'll just maybe start very quickly. I think that this has actually put more of a focus on it and the requirement for new technologies, not just necessarily from an EV point of view, but generally new technologies. We're on a Zoom conference right now. 3 months ago, we'd never even thought of doing that. And so for me, it's highlighted the fact that we need to invest, and there's no point investing in the past. We need to invest in the future. And from a road point of view, then that is EV. And so therefore, there's a push on investment. We know in European countries that there is certainly governmental big push in the last week, 2 weeks, where they've announced that they will support charging infrastructures, but also the adoption of electric vehicles. And I think that's a very big positive, because there was something there, but this has just accelerated it forward so quickly that I would say by 2021, we'll have actually a jump forward maybe 1 or 2 years in comparison to what was going to be maybe a gradual slope up. Hopefully that comes to America as well.
All right, well, we've reached our time. We really want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to participate in this call. And thanks for all the people that dialed in and asked great questions. I think the next race is in Berlin on August 5th through the 13th. Is that right?
All the next races are there.
Yeah, it was like all
the next races. So, and I believe your team has a pretty good history there. So I would tell everyone who's on this call to watch the race and root for the Audi team. And once again, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great weekend.
And just to finish up, for everybody who asked if the recording would be available, it absolutely will. We'll make sure that people who registered get access to it, and it'll be shared on social media as well.
Thank you very much, everybody.
No, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Blair.
Everyone.
Thank you, Stuart. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Good luck in Berlin.
Bye.
Yeah, good luck, y'all.